Remember the Calgary Outlaws? Yeah, in this episode, for episode 2, in my Remember the Calgary series, where I'll talk about Calgary sports teams from the past here, we're going to talk about the Calgary Outlaws here. Now you're going to probably say, well, which Outlaws team are you talking about here? As we have had more than one team that were called the Outlaws in Calgary sports history here. And you're right, I'll be talking about both teams in this episode here. As all part of my talking about Calgary sports teams from the past here. I just felt as a Calgary sports fan that I mostly make videos or make references about on my YouTube channel. I figured it'd be a fun project to talk about teams from the past here. And if you can look at episode 1 here, I talked about the Calgary Rads, the inland hockey team here. And then the thumbnail I used for this episode here was the baseball team, which I found a higher quality logo for the baseball team in the short-lived Canadian Baseball League. So we'll talk about that team first, and then we'll talk about a basketball team that was in the National Basketball League that was exclusive in Canada. The Calgary Outlaws baseball team existed in 2003, while the Calgary Outlaws basketball team existed in 1994 here. And both Outlaws teams kind of had a similar fate here, as they both had pretty good regular seasons here. However, they weren't able to win a championship here because their respective leagues folded here. And they could also say that the Outlaws kind of followed a team that was trying to fill a void from the past that I think that Calgary missed the most here, as the Calgary Outlaws were in the year after when the Calgary Cannons moved to Albuquerque. And yes, I'll be talking about the Calgary Cannons much later in the series here. And then the Calgary Outlaws were a team that came in after the Calgary 88s here, and that'll be another team I'll talk about later in this series as well here. I don't know if you could say it's a cautionary tale to name, if you want to come up with a new team in Calgary, name it the Outlaws here, especially if it follows the team that I'm going to say was trying to fill a void from a previous team that I think most Calgarians miss here. So anyway, let's first talk about the Calgary Outlaws baseball team, as I did find a lot more information on the Calgary Outlaws in terms of some stats and who the heck actually played on the baseball team. It was definitely more recent here, and of course with both these teams, I do remember them existing here. So we'll talk about the baseball team first. I mean, in the description there I have several links where I gathered information as much as I can on both teams here. So the Calgary Outlaws, they were an independent minor league baseball team that played in the short-lived Canadian Baseball League, based out of here in Calgary here. They shared Foothill Stadium, which is the stadium where, or major baseball stadium that we have in Calgary here, with then the Calgary Dogs, and that'll be another team that I will talk about later in the series here, where it started off in Calgary here, and then we definitely had a disagreement with the Calgary Vipers there that they moved to Okotoks, and let's just say Okotoks has embraced that team very well there. So, and I say in 2003, the only Canadian Baseball League season they had the best record in the league and was suspended at the All-Star break. So the Canadian Baseball League only lasted until the All-Star break, which actually the All-Star game was actually here in Calgary here, and the league was suspended and folded. So they were awarded the Jenkins Cup by default, as that was named after Hall of Famer, first Canadian to be inducted in the Baseball Hall of Fame, pitcher Ferguson Jenkins here. So as I say, the Calgary Outlaws, I mean, they were one of the 8 teams in the Canadian Baseball League that only existed in 2003, played at Foothill Stadium. You could say by default, with the best record, we had the league championship and division championship here, and our colors were black, red, and silver here, kind of matching in with the colors of Calgary here. And they were managed by Jody Davis, and then there was Steve Trout and Craig Burak here. So those are the outline of the Calgary Outlaws baseball team. And if you look at the logo, it definitely looks very similar to a couple of logos that were used in a couple other teams here. It does kind of have that look to, if you go to the CFL, the Ottawa Renegades that existed from 2002 to 2004. However, this logo looks very, very, very similar. There'll be another team that I'll eventually talk about in this series, the Calgary Vipers here. In that baseball league, there was a team called the Chico Outlaws. And Chico was a city in California, if I believe. They were called the Outlaws, and they look very similar to that. So that's the Calgary Outlaws, just the gist of it here. So if you look at the whole Canadian Baseball League as a whole here, as I remember they exist. I didn't go to any Outlaws games, but I remember they had games, and they had a television deal at the beginning with the Score, which is now Sportsnet 360, so I was able to watch some games, including bits of that said All-Star game, which happened to be the last game to ever play in the Canadian Baseball League. So as I say, the Canadian Baseball League was an independent minor league that operated from 2003. The league's only commissioner was Major League Hall of Famer and Canadian Baseball Hall of Famer Ferguson Jenkins, and that was the name of the Jenkins Cup here. The league also featured former players such as Francisco Cabrera, Floyd Yeomans, Rich Butler, and Steve Sinclair there. So and I remember this league was announced late in 2001 that it was going to start playing in 2003 here, and definitely was trying to have a league where they thought maybe it can have some more staying power as an outlet for more options for Canadian baseball players, because there was a rule that you can have so many Canadians on a team here, and it was maybe a platform to elevate more Canadian baseball players to maybe potentially go to the league or major leagues or have some more options here. And then, as I said, there were 8 teams. The Outlaws were declared the winner because we had the best record at the league at the time here. And as a TV partners, the Score 18 regular season games, CBL All-Star game, and then the Jenkins Championship Cup Championship, which we didn't get there. The league didn't last that long here. And then the league was based in Vancouver, British Columbia here. And the championship trophy was the Jenkins Cup, and it was named after the commissioner and Hall of Famer pitcher Ferguson Jenkins here. And I gotta say, baseball definitely in Canada is in some spots here where I think the interior British Columbia, and I guess you can say, Southern Ontario, especially influenced with the Toronto Blue Jays. But if Major League Baseball were able to look at Canada here, well, hopefully maybe the Expos will come back. Well, that's a dream right now. But Vancouver could be another site that could potentially house a Major League Baseball team, and I think that's about it here. So on this Wikipedia page here, history here is the CBL was a brainchild of Tony Riviera, former Major League scout and the face of the league. It was also backed by Microsoft product pronouncer Charlton Louis and former Yahoo, the company president and part owner of the San Francisco Giants, Jeff Mallett, and Ferguson Jenkinson was going to act as the commissioner here. Riviera's vision had big goals that followed suit by making big promises. Riviera said that the CBL would be AAA quality, so around the same quality that the Calgary Cannons were, the step just before the big leagues. And it was rumored to have approached the Winnipeg Goldeyes, which is another team that played in the Golden Baseball League, about switching leagues, and even nominated Pete Rose for the Canadian Baseball Hall of Fame. But big plans were initially appeared to be possible. The league announced a national television deal with Sports Channel to Score, which is now Sportsnet 360, while a crowd of 5,100 took in the league's inaugural game in London, Ontario. And that's definitely where I think where the peak was, and then it went south afterwards. This is where we get into the quick demise here. However, despite early promises that the league could average over 2,000 fans a game here, it was clear that CBL was not remote close to those projections here. Only 2 markets averaged over 1,000 fans per game, and that was in Victoria, British Columbia on the island with 1,700, and in Calgary at 1,000. So just under half of that. 4 teams averaged fewer than 300 fans per game here. There was Kelowna, British Columbia, they said 271. Saskatoon, Saskatchewan at 256. Welland at Welland, I believe, is in Ontario, Southern Ontario. That says 200 and let's go back here, 181, and Tours-Roi, Quebec, 163. National TV deal was cancelled after only 6 weeks after the CPA was able to find enough sponsors to cover the production costs here. And then there was the Montreal franchise that never played in Montreal due to the lack playing field, and they were denied a lease at the Olympic Stadium, as the Expos still were in Montreal at that time, but it looked like fate had it that they were going to be relocating. And the last few years that the Montreal Expos were in the major leagues, they actually played a version of their home games in Puerto Rico. And now they're the current Washington Nationals, and they actually won the World Series this past year. And then eventually they were playing their games at the Stade Amara in Sherbrooke, Quebec there, so they played outside of Montreal. And then there was a team that was going to be called the Abbotsford Saints, but then that team relocated to Trois-Rivières, Quebec before the season started here. So there was a team that was going to be in Abbotsford that never happened here. And then it says here the CBL Swan Song was the All-Star game that was held in Calgary. Unwilling to absorb any more losses, Mallet pulled the plug on the entire operation, suspending operations following the All-Star game. A crowd over 5,700 actually watched the game, which happened to be the final CBL game in history, and it ended in a tie. I couldn't find a score, what the score was. It ended in a tie here. Following the game, home run derby was held to produce a combined total of no home runs. Despite losing as much as $4 million to CBL, Mallet initially promised to bring back the league in 2004. However, the remaining assets of the league were cut the auction off December 1st, 2003, and in Vancouver the league never returned here. So I said there was definitely some early promise, I remember, about the Canadian Baseball League. Kind of have a, you know how we have the CFL, and we have a proud history of that up to this point. That they were hoping maybe we would have, a league of our own to maybe have an outlet for Canadian players to maybe get some potential exposure or give them some options to maybe get to the major leagues here. But that never came to fruition. The rules were the same. It was the same, 9 innings. I mean, there were definitely different variations of Canadian football and American football here. It's a Canadian football game evolved from rugby here, but baseball is baseball. So it's the same good old game. So the 8 teams that were in the CBL, and this was the record of each team that was suspended. The Calgary Outlaws had the best record, and they were declared the league champions by default here. So there were 2 divisions. There was the West and East division here. The Calgary Outlaws were 24-13. They played at Foothill Stadium. And then the team that was second in the West division was just a little behind it was the Saskatoon Legends. They were 22-15. They played at Cairns Field. And then the Kelowna Heat was in third place. They were 18-19. They played at Elk Stadium. And then in last place was the Victoria Capitals. They were 13-22, and they played at Royal Athletic Park there. So that was the West Division. The East Division, the London Monarchs were 20-13. They played at Labatt Park. Then the next team was the Niagara Sawyers. They were 15-15. They played at Welland Stadium. And then the Trois-Rivières Saints, they were 14-17. They were played at the Stade Municipal. That's my best French there. And then the last place team was the Montreal Royals with the LES with that French name. They played at Amadé Rod Stadium at Sherbrooke, Quebec there. So those were the 8 teams that were the initial 8 teams in the Canadian Baseball League only. As I mentioned, the Abbotsford team were relocated to Trois-Rivières. So that's the Canadian Baseball League here. So when it comes to the roster here, I mean, there's one page here where I got the roster, which is on statscrew.com here. So I'll put that in the description here. You can take a look at the roster here. So then when it comes to statistics here, you could probably say our best pitchers were Jesus Matos. He was 5-2, and he had an ERA of 3.04, and he had, I'm trying to think how many strikeouts he had here, if I could find it here. But that's just his record here. I can't find he had 5 complete games, and K's here. Yeah, I don't see the K's on here. And then Zach Murray was 4-1, and Chad Williams was 4-2 here. I would say our best ball player, like the best hitter here, was Galinda Gomez in 37 games. He had 11 home runs and 42 RBIs here. And then the next place was Jinsi Savola, if I said it right here. He had 5 home runs and 28 RBIs here, and I'll have all the stats in the description here. So that was just a few notable players here. I actually was able to find a schedule of the Outlaws here, and the league would have started from pretty much Victoria Day to Labor Day here, but however, the All-Star game only made it till the end of July there, so they only played 2 months here. The Calgary Outlaws first game, they had their first games were here in Calgary, and we were playing the Kelowna Heat here. Actually, we lost the first game 7-6 here. That was on May 22nd, 2003. However, the Calgary Outlaws were able to get their revenge. They beat Kelowna Heat 5-4 the next day on May 23rd. And then the last game that the Calgary Outlaws played before the All-Star game was on July 20th, 2003. The Calgary Outlaws did beat the Victoria Capitals 4-6 here, so I actually was able to track down a schedule of the results here. So I'll put that in the description here. And then there was a couple players on Baseball Reference here that actually played in the major leagues very briefly here, but didn't. Where they played in the major leagues first here. So let me find that here. So the couple players that played in the major leagues was Angelo Encarnacion, who just had a very brief stint here on Baseball Reference here, if I can find it. Here he briefly played in the major leagues. If I can find it here. Yeah, he played with the Pittsburgh Pirates in '95 and 1996, and then the Anaheim Angels in 1999 here. So he only played in he played over 70 games in the major leagues here in his career. So Angelo Encarnacion here from the Dominican Republic here. And then the other player that also played in the major leagues here was pitcher Shot Williams here. And Shot Williams, he's an American here from Fresno, California here. He played... Then he played with the California Angels and the Anaheim Angels, as the Anaheim Angels of Anaheim used to be called the California Angels here. So he only played with the Angels in 1996 and 1997 here, and he briefly had a short career there as well. Here he also played with the Vancouver Canadians and the Edmonton Trappers in the Pacific Coast League for baseball there, which is the same league that the Calgary Cannons played in. So there were 2 players that were on the Outlaws here that actually played in the major leagues here. So I actually was able to track down an All-Star game, which the All-Star game played on July 23rd, 2003 in Calgary, and happened to be the last game of the league before it folded here. There were a few players that for the Outlaws that played in the All-Star game. Was Gente Salvador, the outfielder, then Galeno Gomez, the infielder, and then Miguel Pereiro, another infielder, and pitcher Jesus Matos, and then Zach Murray, a Canadian. So there were 5 players that played for the Outlaws in the All-Star game at home here. And then I think that would be almost the last thing here. So that is the Calgary Outlaws here. So we definitely didn't find much information about any uniforms, because when I look for uniforms, I just find the Chico Outlaws, and I think the Chico Outlaws, what they wore in the Golden Baseball League, is similar to what the Calgary Outlaws wore here. And I didn't know anything about salaries here, but I think that's as much as I can give on the Calgary Outlaws here. So what do you think of the Calgary Outlaws and the short-lived Canadian Baseball League here? So I'm going to go take a break here, and I'll come back and we'll talk about the basketball team, the other Outlaws team here. So I'll get notes ready for the basketball team here. I'm back. So now let's shift gears from the diamond to the court here, and we'll talk about the Outlaws basketball team. So let's rewind 9 years from 2003 till 1994 there, and I was eventually able to find a logo, and I did briefly remember it, but I thought it looked more like Yosemite Sam. But when I found that logo, I remember the gun shooting, and it was looking like a cowboy. It looked more like a southern hillbilly with crossed eyes who had too much JD at the Calgary Stampede. However, sadly, we won't have it this year in 2020 due to the global pandemic here, but I was able to eventually find that logo to use in this video here. And the interesting thing with the Calgary Outlaws basketball team here is I barely found any information on, it existing. I get a small blurb. I was able to find, obviously, the logo. I was able to find a clip of a schedule that also will show at the video at the end here. But I couldn't find any, stats, or I've just found, standings, team names that were played in this league. And just like the baseball team, Calgary could not finish the season because the league folded here. However, Calgary was able to get to the final but could not win the championship, and weren't deemed the championship because they weren't the best record here. So you could say both Outlaws teams, when they did play, had a good record, but their respective leagues folded here. So cautionary tale if you want to name a Calgary team the Outlaws here, especially if it's trying to replace a team that I think we're still trying to miss here. And then while I was doing some research, just at home here, finding as much as I can online for material to use in these videos here, and I'll have all the links in the description below here where I got it from. I was surprised that I found there was another Outlaws team that I'll show at the end of this video, that there was another basketball team, if you gotta go all the way back to 1921 here. And it's just one of those old style photos that I think it was courtesy of Glenbow that the university had. And the funny thing is I found players and their names associated with that team there. So it's one of those old style sport team photos that you see from like 100 years ago. So I found that Outlaws team, but other than that, I just have a picture, so I don't have any information on that. So let's shift gears and talk basketball here now. I don't think we'll have as much from what I talked about on the baseball team here because I didn't find as much information here. I do remember both of these teams obviously existing here, much more the baseball team. The basketball team, I did remember seeing that logo that looks like, a southern drunk hillbilly who had too much JD, Jack Daniels, shooting basketballs through his oversized hat there. I remember seeing a bumper sticker of that, so, and that's what I say here. So the Calgary Outlaws was a professional basketball team based out of Calgary in 1984 here. The Outlaws were a member of the National Basketball League. This league was based in Canada here. The Outlaws played most of their games at the Jack Simpson Gym at the university and occasionally at the Olympic style dome here. So this team followed what I say the team that Calgary would say missed the most for basketball. It was the 88s here. And just like the Outlaws baseball team, it followed the Calgary Cannons here. That's why I say it's the cautionary tale here. So the National Basketball League, this is the league that the Outlaws played in, that was based in Canada and lasted only 1.5 seasons. It was a full season in 1993. 1994 was only the half season here, where that was the Calgary Outlaws, where they were an expansion team here. It rose from the ashes of the World Basketball League, which that was the league that the Calgary 88s played in, which I'll talk about that in a few episodes from now here, which folded after the 1992 season. That's why the Calgary 88s didn't last after 1992 here. The NBL's first game was played in May 1st, 1993, and we'll definitely have some interesting names here. And I know there's another National Basketball League in Canada here where all the teams are out in Atlantic Canada and some in Ontario here, but none so in the western part of the country here. So I think basketball seems to be more interesting, more Canadians are more interested in the eastern part of the country. I'm sure a lot of that has to do with just the Toronto Raptors, but culturally it just seems like that wasn't the case here. But the NBL's first game was played May 1st, 1993, when the Cape Breton Breakers, out in the Atlantic there, visited the Halifax Windjammers. What a name there. Go Windjammers. The Breakers won the regular season championship with a 30-16 record, but they lost the championship finals to the Saskatoon 3-1 here. And then 1994, this is the season we're talking about here, there were rumors that the Cape Breton team was going to move to St. John mid-season, St. John, New Brunswick here, which never happened before the league folded on July 9th. 1994 here, Halifax finished last in 1993, was in first place at the time when the league folded here, and the league's president was Sam Cates. I believe it's the same Sam Cates that is, no, it's not the same Sam, I was thinking of a different Cates here, but he was the MP and was a mayor of Winnipeg at one time there, and commissioner was Tom Niscali here. I was thinking of, it's Daryl Cates. I was thinking of Rex, I saw Cates and I'm like, but no, that's Daryl Cates. So the NBL teams here, well, the Calgary Outlaws were an expansion team in 1994 here. Then there was the Cape Breton Breakers, which were played out of Sydney, Nova Scotia here, and at the Centre 2000. They were an expansion team, 93 and 94 here. Then you had the Halifax Windjammers. They were based in Halifax. They played at the Halifax Metro Centre here. They were a holdover from the World Basketball League, so they were part of that team league, and then they moved into this league here. They played 93 and 94 here. And then here was the Edmonton Sky Hawks. They were in Edmonton, and they played at Northlands Coliseum, which now is the former Rexall place, where the Oilers first played there. They played in 93 and the playoffs in 94, and that team moved from Hamilton. And then the Hamilton Sky Hawks played in Cops Coliseum in 1993 before they moved to Edmonton there. They were also a holdover from the World Basketball League, and then I said they moved to Edmonton here. Then there was a team called the Montreal Dragons. They were in Montreal, Quebec. They played at the Breton Auditorium. They were expansion in 93. Then there was the Saskatoon Slam. They played in Saskatoon at Saskatchewan Place in 1994. They were also a holdover from the World Basketball League. Ownership changed this franchise. Originally, they were the Saskatchewan Storm there. I do briefly remember the Saskatchewan Storm from that league, where the Calgary 88s played, and I think they had the same colors as the Los Angeles Lakers here. And then the last team was the Winnipeg Thunder. They were in Winnipeg, played at the old Winnipeg Arena there, and they were also a holdover from the World Basketball League here. So maybe when I get into the Calgary 88s episode, we'll find out why they weren't holdover to go in this league here. So in some way, the Outlaws were a legacy from the 88s in an indirect way here. So in 1993, before the Calgary Outlaws came in, it was the Cape Breton Breakers that were the best team in the league here. And then other teams that I mentioned here, the Montreal Dragons folded mid-season on June 10th, 1993. Then there was the Hamilton Sky Hawks. They were transferred to Edmonton prior to the start of the playoffs. So that's definitely very interesting here, where a team moved during the season for the playoffs here. Imagine that today in a major league. And then the playoffs that year, semifinals, you had the Cape Breton defeated Edmonton 2-1 after they moved from Hamilton. And then Saskatoon defeated Winnipeg 2-1. And then the finals, you had Saskatoon defeated Cape Breton 3-1 here. And then there are some touring teams in this league here. You had the Atlantic Coast Conference All-Stars replaced the Atlantic 10 team. So there were, and then there was the Elites in Action, Big East, and there was a Canadian national team also in this league here. And that's one thing I'll find when I do more of these basketball leagues, because I'll talk about the Drillers and Crush as well in this series, that there were some touring teams in these independent basketball leagues here. So if we get to 1994 here, which is the only year that the Calgary Outlaws existed and the league did not finish the season here, the Halifax Windjammers were the top team in the league here. They were 15-6. And then the Calgary Outlaws were second place. They were 13-11 here, and they were 3.5 games back. And then the Cape Breton Breakers were 11-10 here, and then the Saskatoon Slam were 10-13. And then the Edmonton Sky Hawks were 10-14, and the Winnipeg Thunder were 10-15 here. And the league disbanded on July 9th, 1994 here. So the league championship here, well, actually the Halifax Windjammers we're playing the Calgary Outlaws in the final here. So we got to the finals here, but the league folded and they were declared champions. So the league did not get to the finals. I think it was a winner and runner up. They were taking the top two here. So I don't think we made it to the playoffs at all here for the playoffs to have a chance to win the championship here. So kind of like if the baseball league, the Calgary Outlaws were the top team in the league and were declared league championships here. In this case, Halifax was declared league championships here. And then I found this APBR.org website here, which just showed a schedule and results from 1993. It looks like almost a 1990s website here, which I was from the Wikipedia page. I'll put that in the description as well here. And then I found another interesting site. It was from Naismith the Smith, which is Encyclopedia of Canadian Basketball, James Naismith, and now Steve Nash here. It just pretty much reiterated the same information that I've already talked about here, but I'll put that in the description here. It mentioned a few more players here, but it doesn't mention anything about the Calgary Outlaws other than the results here. So I couldn't find anything about who actually played for the Calgary Outlaws. Who knows, maybe when this video comes out and gets out here, I might have comments saying, oh, I might have played for this team. I know when I released my Calgary Rads video, there were some comments about saying I was too young to try out for the team at the time, and I had a brother that tried out, if I remember right. And yeah, I'll bring in the clip of the schedule that I found, that and the logo, and then at the end of this episode here, I'll share this picture of the Outlaws basketball team. There was an Outlaws team that won the championship for the 1921-22 season here. So, and it's definitely not related to that team, but I'll just throw that something extra in this episode here to bring even more historic on the Remember the Calgary series. So, as I say, this is all I can find about the basketball team. It's a similar fate. Both teams had good regular seasons, but weren't able to finish the season because the respective leagues folded here. So, what do you remember about the Calgary Outlaws? Did you go to any Outlaws games, both on baseball and basketball here? I mean, I definitely remember them existing here. I'm just going to say that after when we lost the Calgary Cannons to the Albuquerque there, and the big reason why we lost the Calgary Cannons here, well, definitely, if you're familiar in the Calgary area now, Foothill Stadium, or Burns Stadium, it was also called at the time here, it definitely, let's just say it's definitely dilapidated and dated. It was built in 1966 here, and it did house a lot of baseball teams that we'll talk about later in the series here, but we lost the Calgary Cannons because of the stadium. I mean, we couldn't renovate or get a new stadium here. I'm going to say going back to the Calgary Dogs, now the Okotoks Dogs here, that Siemens Stadium, I never got a game there, but seeing, pictures and videos of that stadium, and that stadium definitely looks a lot more state-of-the-art for that league here, which definitely puts Foothill Stadium to shame here, and it's definitely hasn't really been used for the last 10 years, and Calgary is definitely a tough market for baseball here, just because of the weather. If we were to ever get another baseball team, we would need to probably have a more modern indoor stadium here, just because of their crazy weather here, or best we can have is maybe a independent single A team, or in case of the now Okotoks Dogs collegiate summer league. But I think Calgary is definitely a tough market for baseball and basketball here, and I'm going to say, I think when I talk about the 88s, I think that was the most successful basketball team here, but now with talking about the Outlaws, and then eventually I will talk about the Drillers and the Crush here, there were definitely a couple of attempts to bring in some independent basketball in Calgary here that didn't last long, because I just feel the culture isn't here in Calgary anymore when it comes to basketball here, and I don't think Calgary will never, at least not in my lifetime, that will never support an NBA team. I just can't see it right now. Even if you had a billionaire owner that had endless funds here and said, I want to bring a Calgary team to the NBA here, how are we going to attract, top talent? How are we going to attract LeBron James or Zion Williams here? The culture is just not here in Calgary in my mind, and I think once We lost the 88s and definitely lost the Cannons here. And you'll definitely see this later in the series where I talk about past basketball and baseball teams in the series here. But that's all I can find on the Calgary Outlaws here. So that's just my final thoughts here. So as I say, if you want to follow along with this Calgary sports fan's journey, home to Flames, Hitmen, Roughnecks, and Stampeders, and formerly home to the Outlaws, I guess times 3. When you got the baseball team, the basketball team that I talked about here, and then I tripped upon the Outlaws team from the 1920s that won the league championship, courtesy of Glenbow and University there. So if that sounds like you'll be interested to watch, I talk Calgary sports, but I also do personal logs, attempt to comedy, and I also share my experiences. Let's say I'm on the road or at a sporting event here, so if that all sounds like you'd be interested to watch, to follow along with this Calgary sports fan's journey, you know what you need to do. I also have my other social media links down in the description there for other ways to follow me here. So this is episode 2 of my Remember the Calgary series, where I talk about Calgary teams from the past here that are no longer with us, or they're with us somewhere else. As I might have touched on the, let's say, the Albuquerque Isotopes or the Okotoks Dogs, but there's definitely no basketball teams that used to be here that exist somewhere else. And then for episode 3, I'm going to plan to talk about the Calgary Cowboys. The Calgary Cowboys that were in the World Hockey Association, and I'm going to say that in some way probably planted a seed to finally get maybe some professional hockey in Calgary here, because I think the Calgary Cowboys and the World Hockey Association played a role in eventually showing signs there's potential that Calgary could support a professional hockey team here. We just didn't have a big enough arena time there, but I plan to talk about that for episode 3 in this series here. And I say the best way to find out when I plan to make the next episode here is look on Twitter and Instagram here when I'll share the logo and just briefly touch about it and say stay tuned for this video here. My plan, or if you go back all the way to my introduction video where I outlined all the teams that I plan to talk about in the series here, if I can release an episode every couple weeks, I'll be happy about that. I mean, I'll try to release it as soon as I can once I get my notes here, but I think I've looked and found as much as I could on both Outlaws teams here, and all the links will be in the description there, especially with some of the graphics that I use in this video here. So as I say, let's go Outlaws. This is all I can talk about or find about the Calgary Outlaws without really going high and low and going to the top of the mountains or going to the bottom of the seas, or I don't think, even pandemic aside here, where libraries aren't allowed to be open yet, I don't think the library would have very much information on the Outlaws here. But if you have anything else to maybe fill in the gaps, just feel free to comment below, or who knows, if you apply to the podcast, did you actually play for the basketball team? I mean, I found information for at least played for the baseball team, but yeah, it's definitely been a fun project here. So as I say, I'll see you in the next video here.